good evening again, church.
Good evening.
Just before we got started, Sister Gwen was telling Sid and I that there was a neighborhood party that was going on. And speaking of parties, did you know that Jesus himself loved parties? I mean, his first miracle recorded was at a wedding in Cana, according to John chapter 2. And as a matter of fact, speaking of parties, he gives us an example of some sort of analogy using an earthly story with a heavenly meaning. In regards to our study for tonight, he chooses to give us an account of a wedding feast to show the necessity of making adequate preparations for our accounting. To fully appreciate the lesson, we must understand the story and its setting, the parable and its setting. In an oriental marriage of Jesus' time, the groom and bride left the groom's estate to go into the village for the wedding ceremony. When the ceremony was concluded, the newlyweds would return to their estate where they were greeted by friends and well-wishers and loved ones, and the evening of fun and feasting would then begin. It was an honor to be chosen as these 10 young ladies that we're about to discuss here tonight. It was an honor for them to be chosen to officially welcome the newlyweds home. But half of these ladies were disappointed, humiliated, and disgraced. Why is that? Well, if you open your Bibles to Matthew chapter 25, verses 1 through 13, we will find out why. Matthew 25, beginning at verse 1. Jesus says, "In the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish and 5 were wise. For when the foolish took their lamps, they took no oil with them. But the wise took flasks of oil with their lamps. As the bridegroom was delayed, they all became drowsy and slept. But at midnight there was a cry, 'Here is the bridegroom! Come out to meet him!' Then all those virgins rose and trimmed their lamps. And the foolish said to the wise, 'Give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out.' But the wise answered, saying, 'Since there will not be enough for us and for you, go rather to the dealers and buy for yourselves.' And while they were going to buy, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went in with him to the marriage feast, and the door was shut. Afterward, the other virgins came also, saying, 'Lord, Lord, open up to us.' But he answered, 'Truly I say to you, I do not know you. Watch therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour.'" We are to watch. The point of this parable is preparation. It's being prepared at all times. Be prepared at all costs. To be ready, to be watchful, to be alert. Why? Because we do not know the day or the hour that the bridegroom of our Lord Jesus Christ returns with his wife, church. We are to watch. Jesus seemed to imply in this parable of the 10 virgins that one of man's most dangerous dispositions is carelessness. He said, "Therefore be on alert, for you do not know which day your Lord is coming." He said it right there in verse 13. He also said it earlier, going back chapter 24, verse 42. He said the same thing. Peter says, "Be sober. Be on alert. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour." 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8. The Lord is not encouraging us to be sky gazers. We're not supposed to be just standing up saying, "Oh, where is he?" Not literally speaking. That's not what he's talking about. To the contrary, why do you stand looking into the sky? The angels even asked that question, did they not? Acts chapter 1, verse 11, when the Lord ascended back up into the sky, they were just standing there gazing. And finally the angels just said, why are you looking up at the sky? Get to work. Stay busy. Stay busy while you're waiting for his return. Too many national evangelists and religious TV personalities have based their entire ministries on trying to forecast and determine the time on when the Lord is going to return. If you actually go throughout history, beginning from 1st century AD all the way to 2022 AD, you'll find hundreds of people who try to forecast and determine the time of when Judgment Day is going to happen. How many of them were right? None of them, obviously. None of them were. Probably the most profound one that I could think of would be Harold Camping. Y'all remember old Harold Camping? It's going to be May 21st, 2011. May 21st, 2011 came. Nothing happened. He told the reporter saying that he was flabbergasted. That was his exact words, flabbergasted. And he needed to do some more studying. And so then his solution was, it wasn't May 21st, it's actually October 21st. He says May 21st was a spiritual judgment, a spiritual rapture, and the physical rapture is going to happen 8 months later, October 21st. Well, October 21st, 2011 came around, nothing happened. Nothing happened. And finally he concluded saying that I guess nobody will ever know. Let's just move on, shall we? Not only such people like Harold Campings and others, not only are their efforts in vain, but their whole heart thrust is counterproductive to spiritual development. Matthew 24:36. We are not supposed to figure out when to prepare, but how to prepare. A wife watches for her homebound husband, not by standing at the door and straining her eyes, but by cleaning the house and preparing a tempting dinner. That's normally what a stay-at-home wife does, right? Doesn't wait for the husband by the door 24/7. No. She waits by what? Getting busy. Getting the house busy and ready. And so the Lord does not want to upset us by his coming. The brethren at Thessalonica made this mistake. If you look specifically at 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 1 through 3. Whether working or asleep, we will be taken to heaven when he returns. So we should not have to change our routine, even if we could discern the time of his advent. Matthew 24, verse 40. But no one should fear the Lord's return. The bridegroom's coming meant a feast and a party in Middle Eastern time. Paul looked forward to a crown, he says, 2 Timothy 4, 6 through 8. Peter said that we should be looking and earnestly desiring the coming of the day of God, 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 12. So as we dive into our text this evening, we're just going to look at it from two point of views. We're going to look at it from the point of views of the wise ones, and then look at the point of view of the foolish ones. Complete preparation is wise. We see that the 5 virgins who did prepare themselves adequately and completely, they were very wise in doing so, were they not? Most people put off till tomorrow what they should do today. We are used to cramming things in at the very last minute, are we not? Some of us may struggle with that. Some of us may struggle with procrastination. Some of us may struggle with waiting at the very last minute to cram it all in. We see this in the Ark of Noah. Jesus himself even gave that example earlier in chapter 24, verses 36 through 41. What happened with those who were not completely prepared during the days of Noah? Well, they continued on their ungodly lifestyle, eating, drinking, marrying, and whatnot, and then suddenly the flood came and took them out, just like that. Even though God is a loving God, a time comes when it is too late to benefit from the grace of God. And that time comes whenever he's ready, whenever that day is. The door was shut of the ark, the rains came, and men beat upon that door until their fists were probably even bloody. but no one entered after the door was closed. In our parable, no one entered after the gates were closed, verse 10 through 12. Death closes the door, and there is no second chance. Hebrews chapter 9, verse 27. It's appointed for man to die once, and then what? Comes the judgment. So let me ask you a question. If you knew that today were your last day on earth, how would you spend it? If you answer, well, I'd become a child of God, or if you answer saying that I would be restored to my first love, or I would try to make things right with my friends and loved ones, if you answer that, well, I pity you. It should not change your behavior at all to know it is your last day on earth, because you should be living already as if every day were your last. Because we're not promised tomorrow. Paul says that we should be conducting ourselves as living sacrifices. That is present tense. Continually living ourselves as sacrifices. Romans chapter 12, verse 1. But I want you to note carefully, the difference between the wise virgins and the foolish virgins was not that one group made preparations and the other did not. All made preparations, Jesus says. The difference was in the amount of preparation that was made. It was the amount of the preparation that was made. That's the difference. How could these foolish virgins sleep while awaiting the groom's return? Did they not know that he would condemn them? The answer is no. They did not know that they would be condemned at all. They all slept because they all felt they had made sufficient preparation for the occasion. Half of them were honestly mistaken. Likewise, the Christians at Sardis, seeing that we're going through the 7 churches in our Book of Revelation class on Sunday mornings, they had a name that they were alive, but they were dead. Revelation chapter 3, verse 1 and 2. Many of us, we fall sometimes under the syndrome of just wanting to be average Christians. We are content to see how little we must give up and still go to heaven. We want to know the minimum that is expected of us to be, quote unquote, faithful Christians. Our brethren help us by developing a criteria which labels us faithful if we attend a certain number of public services per week and give a certain percentage of our earnings. But what if they label us alive and we find at the judgment we are dead? Jesus' standard was, what do you do more than others? Matthew 5:47. What do you do more than others? Again, it's Matthew 5:47. So, we see here again that, yeah, in a way, in some way, to a certain extent, both parties, the wise and the foolish virgins, they had some preparations made. But the difference between them was the amount of it put in. The wise gave complete preparation. That is why they're known as being the wise virgins. But number 2, when we look on the other side of the coin, careless preparation is foolish. Careless preparation is foolish. Now, these 5 foolish virgins, some versions may say maidens or young ladies. The appropriate and accurate translation of that word is virgins. But these 5 foolish virgins, they were not foolish in the sense of being stupid. Don't think of it like that. Now, some of you may try to justify saying, well, being careless is being stupid. Okay, yeah, I can kind of see that, but that's not the idea. They weren't being stupid. It's not that they were less intelligent than the others. They just acted as the stupid do. That's the best way of putting it. And this could be our problem, sometimes without even knowing it. Paul cried, "O foolish Galatians." Galatians chapter 3, verse 1. "O foolish Galatians." He called them foolish not because they had lost their minds since he had seen them, but because they had lost their heads on their judgment. Jesus said to the wealthy farmer, "Thou fool." Yeah, I'm using King James again. "Thou fool." Not because he was indolent, or not because he was an ignorant failure or whatnot, but it was because he was not acting intelligently in his relations with God. He was not acting intelligently with his relations with God. That's why Jesus called that farmer, "Thou fool." You're not acting intelligently in your relations with God. Again, that account is found in Luke chapter 12, verse 16 through 21. You are wise if you are building your life on God's word. You are foolish if you are listening to man's wisdom. Matthew chapter 7, verse 24 through 27. There are at least 4 reasons why these 4 versions were labeled foolish from our text. Number 1, they began miscalculating the groom's return. We see that in the text. Number 1, they began by miscalculating the groom's return. If he had arrived on schedule, all would have been fine. But when he tarried, they were unprepared for the delay. You do not know the obstacles which are ahead of you in life. You need to train to climb the highest possible one. You do not know what temptations and snares lie in front of you. You need a faith strong enough to meet any trial. What you least expect, you must expect. And so these virgins here, 5 foolish virgins. Number 1, they were considered foolish because they miscalculated the groom's return. Number 2, these foolish ones also overestimated their own preparations. They overestimated their own preparations. Conceit and pride can make a fool of any of us. Therefore, let him who thinks he stands take heed lest he falls. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 12. Jesus said that when we have done all that is required of us, we are yet unprofitable servants. Luke 17, verse 10. What would allow us to think we have done enough before we have done all we can do? I'll ask that question again. What would allow us to think we have done enough before we have done all we can do? We can depend upon the mercy of God, upon his love and grace, but let us never presume upon them. Only a fool would say, "I have done enough, I have made it now." That's like a fool saying that, "Yeah, I love my wife enough, and so I'm just not going to grow in my love for her anymore." Wow. The wise can say, "I have fought the good fight. I have finished the course. I have kept the faith. In the future there is laid up for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day. And not only to me, but unto all those who love his appearing." 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 7 and 8. So number 2, these foolish ones also overestimated their own preparations. Number 3, these virgins, foolish virgins, also misunderstood their position. They misunderstood their position. The privileged seemed to take their blessings for granted. Jesus had trouble with the Jews of his day on account of this. They would often boast about saying that we are what? Abraham's children. We are heirs of Abraham. We are from the seed of Abraham. John chapter 8, verse 33. But yet, his reply was that God could take a stone and replace them if he had desired. They're not all high and mighty like they think they are. God can easily just root you up and just replace you with a stone if he desired. Instead of their being the chosen of God, inspiring them to service, it lulled them into indifference and also into rebellion at times. And so some Christians have the same attitude those Jews did. They feel that accepting the religion of Jesus Christ is sufficient and make no effort to excel in the profession. Like the Laodiceans, they are neither hot nor cold. They are sickening, though. And the Lord just spits it right out of their mouth, right out of his mouth. Revelation chapter 3, verse 15 and 16. I want you read again Jesus' preview of the judgment scene in this chapter, Matthew 25, verse 31 through 46. When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, then he will sit on his glorious throne. Before him will be gathered all the nations, and he will separate people one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will place the sheep on his right, but the goats on the left. Then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundations of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me." Then the righteous will answer him, saying, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? And when did we see you a stranger and welcome you, or naked and clothe you? And when did we see you sick or in prison and visit you?" And the king will answer them, "Truly I say to you, as you did it to one of the least of these, you did it to me." Then he will say to those on his left, "Depart from me, you cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, and you gave me no drink. I was a stranger, and you did not welcome me. Naked, and you did not clothe me. Sick and in prison, and you did not visit me." Then they also will answer, saying, "Lord, when did we see you hungry, or thirsty, or a stranger, or naked, or sick, or in prison, and did not minister to you?" And he will answer them, saying, "Truly I say to you, you did not do it to one of the least of these. You did not do it to me. And these will go away into eternal punishment, but the righteous into eternal life." Those who have served are not saved. You notice that? Those who have not served are not saved. Nor is mere service alone enough. A wife can never be satisfied merely because her husband is a good provider. If he laid at her feet everything that money could buy, there would still be a lack of everything because he reached into his purse and not into his heart. Most women can do without the fripperies if she has assurance she has her husband's heart. Christ is never satisfied just because a Christian gives to him a lot of money or does many good deeds. He wants us to give him our hearts, and he is not going to be satisfied with less. Love is the ingredient that makes this all possible. That is why what John says this morning in our Bible class in Revelation chapter 2, verses 1 through 9, one thing that he had against Ephesus was what? You have abandoned your first love. That was it. Love is the ingredient that makes this all possible. Why else? Why else would Jesus say that the greatest command is love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your strength, all your mind? That makes up our entire being, folks. Everything that makes us who we are. We are to give him our love. That is going to be the ingredient that makes this all possible. If we can restore our first love with him, amazing things can be done in the community of Pamber. I know that. As long as we can restore our love to him, Number 4, these women were foolish to think they could make preparations after the groom appeared. That was another reason that we see here in our text, Matthew 25, 1 through 13, of why they were known to be foolish, is that they thought that they could make preparations after the groom appeared. Paul describes the end with the following words. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 22. He says, in a flash, in the twinkling of an eye at the last trumpet. Folks, there will not be a moment to make right any wrong. There won't be a moment. There will not be a moment to make right any wrong, to complete any task, or to correct any error. And that twinkling of an eye, to sound that last trumpet, that's it. That is it. The door is closed. And Paul says that every knee will bow and every tongue will confess. Every knee means everybody, because now, for those who are atheists, for those who are unbelievers, now they will fully know that they were wrong their whole life. And sadly, it's going to be far too late. For those of us who are prone to put things off till later, this should be an awakening revelation. This should be right here, Matthew 25, 1 through 13. This should be an awakening revelation. Have you ever walked into a classroom, ready for the routine you have come to expect, only to have the teacher say, all right, put away your books, take out paper and pen, and get ready for a pop quiz? The reason why I bring that up is because that's still fresh in my mind in my Acts class back at Bear Valley, taught by Wayne Berger. Man, dude had a love for pop quizzes. You always wish that you had made better preparations, didn't you, when you faced those pop quizzes, huh? You can tell by the tranquil look on your neighbor's face that he had made preparations for this eventuality that's now made known. But because some of your classmates may have been prepared, you kind of envied them. And you kind of got mad and upset. I have a feeling that this is the way it will be when the Lord returns. Those goats that we talked about, that Jesus talked about, they're going to look over and they're going to see us sheep. They're going to envy us. They are. I believe they will. Because now there's nothing that they can do. And they're going to go into everlasting fire, everlasting punishment. And from our text this morning, well, one of the texts that we mentioned, 2 Corinthians 1, verse 9. 2 Thessalonians 1, verse 9. They're going to be away from the presence of the Lord as well. Away from the presence of the Lord. Can you imagine that? It's gone. And that's just not for a moment. That's going to be forever, folks. The foolish virgins sat outside the gate in darkness, hearing the music and the laughter, smelling the good food, and probably even cursing their own stupidity. We should not make their mistake. The parable was told to encourage you to stop acting foolishly and obey the gospel. Mark chapter 16, verse 15 and 16, at least for those who have not been saved yet. Or maybe there's some that need to be restored to their first love. This is a wake-up call for them as well. Or maybe you need to get things done, which you must do before you give an accounting, such as get some sin out of your life. To do that would be right now. Right now. How sad if it has been told in vain. Behold, the bridegroom comes. This lesson tonight is that we are to watch. And there's only going to be two sides. We're either going to be completely prepared or we're going to be carelessly prepared. Which side of it are we going to be? This lesson is also supposed to be a wake-up call for us to be on that side of being completely prepared. Don't wait. Don't put it off until the last minute. Don't procrastinate. Do not do that. That's what they did. It's what the foolish virgins did, and they're paid for it. Don't pay for it eternally. Do it now. Get things right. Obey the gospel now. Be restored to your first love now. Make things right. Get sit down of your life before you have to give an account to Him on Judgment Day. Do it right now. If you have any need, please come forward together as we stand and as we sing.
Kneel at the cross. Christ will meet you there. He entered